everyone. Today we will talk about a new topic, which is probability. So we have two types of probability. We have the theoretical probability and experimental probability. So the objective of this course is to find and to know how to find the probability of one event. So as we said, we have two types of these probabilities. So we will learn how to find this probability. Before starting, we have some vocabs for this lesson, like probability, sample space, trial, event, and outcome. So one by one we will know how to use and how to find the probability and each one of these definitions. So probability by definition is a way or a measure of how likely an event is to happen or to occur. So we have some events and we have to find how likely each one of these events is to happen. While an outcome is, for each one of these events, we have a possible result for each event. So we call this an outcome of this event. The sample space, we can define the sample space as all the sets or all the possible outcomes of this experiment. An event, which is one outcome or set or one set of all the outcomes. Let's take two examples and see how we can find these definitions. For example, in this trial, we have a dice or cube. In this sample space of this cube, we have the outcomes or all the outcomes of this event is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. So we cannot have more than these outcomes. We cannot have more than this sample space. The event in this case is getting one of these faces. So we call this an event. So the probability, for example, of getting 3 out of all these outcomes or out of this sample space, we call this probability of one of these events. The experiment or the trial in this case is rolling a number cube or rolling this die. Okay, so while in this case, in this trial, in this experiment, we have a spinning arrow. So the sample space is red, blue, green, and yellow. So we have 4 outcomes of this trial, 4 outcomes of this experiment. The probability is finding one of these outcomes, how likely an event is to happen. So when to find probability, we have a range. So we have 2 ways to write the probabilities of one of these events. So either we can write a fraction or we can write the decimals from 1 to 0 as a fraction or from 0% to 100%. Let's look at this line. So in this line we have a line between 0 and 1. So basically if one of these events is not likely to happen at all, which is an impossible event, we would say the probability of this event is 0 or 0%. If we are 100% sure that this event is gonna happen, so this is basically a certain event, so we would say the probability of this event is 1 or 100%. If we have one of these events as 0.5 or half or 50%, so we would say evenly to happen or as likely as not, because it's exactly at the middle of this line. All the events in this part we would say these events are likely to happen, while all the events in the line between 0 and half is less likely to happen. So in this line more likely to happen, while in this part is less likely to happen. So as we said, we have a range from 0 to 1 for all these events. So basically if we have two events have the same probability, so I would say that these two outcomes or these two events are equally likely to happen. But the question is, for each one of these outcomes or events, how would I find the probability? When I have a trial or I have an experiment, so I would define the probability of one of these events as the number of favorable outcomes over the total number of outcomes in the sample space. So exactly the definition is what I need over all the sample space. For example, my favorable outcome is to have 3 of one of these faces in a dice. So I would say having this 3 over all the number of sample spaces. This is how we can find the probability of one of the outcomes or one of the events that I have in this trial or in this experiment. So let's take this definition and try to use this in one of these experiments. Okay guys, let's read this question. In this question we have a word which is probable is written on a cards, and I'm writing on each one of these cards one of these letters, and then I'm mixing up all these cards. So I'm asking you find the probability that a randomly selected card has a consonant. So how to find the probability or how to find the answer of this question? So basically I have how many consonants, which is the favorable outcomes in this case. It's 5. Why it's 5? Because if you want to choose all the consonant of this word, you would say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because this B is, I'm writing this B once. So basically I have 1 favorable outcomes, the consonants, while the total sample space is 8 letters. So the probability of this event, which is having a consonant, is 5 over 8, which is 62.5%, which is less than 100% or less than 1. This is how we find the probability. We take the favorable outcomes over the total sample space. Let's take another example, guys. Let's have an experiment, and in this experiment we have two dice. The first one is the red one, the second one is the blue one. So if I'm throwing these two or rolling these two dice, so it's asking me find the probability that the difference between the two numbers is 4. So basically guys, let's try to write all the possible outcomes or all the sample space. So we have the red, the first die, we have the second die. So I'm trying to write all the possible outcomes or the sample space. 1, 2, 3 until 6 for the first one. Let's say we have first time we have 1s for all the second die, and then we have 2, 3, and 4, and 5. So basically I'm looking for all the possible outcomes is 36. So I'm looking for the difference between these two numbers is 4. So basically I have this, which is 4. I can take and count all the possible ways to find the difference, which is 4. For example, this one is 4, and so on. So I'm counting all these possible ways So we have 4 over 36, so which is 1 over 9. So the probability to have such an outcome is 1 over 9, which is less than 1. So basically this is how we find the probability. We take the favorable outcomes over the sample space, and the number should be between 0 and 1. Thank you guys, hope you enjoyed the class.